Hey everyone, it's Andre Luck here for my video this week. And this week, what I'm going to talk about is the fifth problem that we see with B2B sports sales environments and how we can provide solutions for that and the benefits that come from those solutions. So, the fifth problem is once you do the training, it doesn't always stick. So, people get real excited, people get hyped up a couple days, they go through the training and maybe even that next week or couple weeks they really lean into it, but then they revert back to what they were doing before, or they don't follow through with it. And I'm not going to say the training was a waste, but you didn't see the impact you were hoping to see on the back end. So the solution to that is to make sure that there's continued development post the initial training. And then the benefit that comes from that, you're going to see better results over time. You're not having to start over every time you bring in a trainer. If you bring in another trainer or the same trainer, you could build off that initial training and continue to elevate your B2B sales skills for your team. So before we dive into that deeper, I want to recap the other four problems and solutions that we've talked about over the past few weeks in this B2B sports sales transformation. So the first one is that a lot of sports sales people and their leaders aren't armed and equipped to have smart business conversations. So to work with that and to help with that, we come in and do that initial training that I just talked about, really like align the team on here's how we go to market with our team to the business community. Here's the things we say. Here's the questions that we ask, the conversations that we have, and how to have an ROI conversation so that you're not defaulting to just employee outings, but and saying general statements like we work with businesses, but actually speaking specifically to the right people, getting access to that sales and marketing budget, because we know that's way bigger than the employee budget that's smaller. So teaching that team and the leaders to have business conversations. The next problem is that leaders get inundated with being in meetings, but getting pulled in and answering a lot of one-off questions that a lot of times the reps can serve themselves. So what we like to do is take all the best practices from the best salespeople, from the leaders, get it out of their head and document that into a structured playbook that everyone's using. The big benefit there is it saves everyone time. It saves the leaders time, saves the salespeople time. When you onboard new people, you can go to this playbook and go back to your best practices because it's all documented in there for you. The third problem you see is there's not alignment or uniformity. I don't even know if that's a word, but a uniform forecasting and reporting system so that your executive team can check in and see where we're at from a projection standpoint and future forecasts, the leaders, the reps, and not a built out set of stages so that everyone knows when you look at an account or you look at a contact in your database system, where they are and what that means. So, what you come in and do and how we help with that. And the solution is to align the forecasting, get the key metrics across the business, and build out forecasts that all align towards that and clearly define the stages in your CRM process. So when a contact or an opportunity moves from stage one to stage two, there's clearly defined criteria on what that means and what it takes for someone to move from stage two to stage three. So when you look at a report and say, all right, X amount of our accounts or opportunities are in stage three, and we project this future revenue that's going to close on these dates, there's alignment and uniformity to where everyone is and what that means. And that just leads to better reporting, better decision making, because you're looking at future forecasts and know we're pacing well towards our goals and our targets, or we're not. And we need to pivot and do some things differently because we're not on track, and we can clearly see that. We don't have to bug people checking in on, hey, where are you at with this deal? I know you were talking to this company. Like, where are we at? Everyone can go to the report, look at it by detail at that contact and at that account, or from a macro level and just understand holistically how we're doing on certain campaigns or overall initiatives. The fourth problem is that there's a lot of manual tasks, a lot of administrative tasks. And now there's so many technologies, over 2,000 different sales tools and technologies. The key is choosing the right one. So working with teams to pick the right solutions that are going to help with them. For me as a seller, one that's big is LinkedIn Sales Navigator, and then pairing that up with a database platform where you can get direct contact information. But even from a larger standpoint, like what are those things that can really help add fuel to the fire of a process that's already working really well manually? That's going to lead to better results in the revenue side of things, but also more efficiencies as a sales team. So those are the four that we've talked about. So I'm going to dive in deeper now into the fifth one about making sure that the training sticks. So the reason this happens is, again, everyone's excited, they go through the training, but then they just get busy. Because when you're locked in on that training for 2 or 3 days, you have an intentional focus and effort on just that. But then when you get back into the real world of like your day to day, there's customers coming to you, there's deals that were already you were working, and just a lot of stuff that happens in your day to day. So you just get busy. You revert back to your old ways, or maybe it was uncomfortable and you try it for a few days, you didn't see success, and you fall back. So you got to stick with that at least. And I say at least 30 days, but really it's 3 months that you need to keep going with it, even if it's uncomfortable. Every call you make, every meeting you go on, every objection you overcome allows you to just get a little bit better and then finally start to see a breakthrough. So really sticking with it and going through it. The other reason sometimes I see is that the leaders aren't engaged in the training. Some may be sitting in, but they're checking their emails, they're going and doing other work, but the best I've seen are in there. They're taking notes. They're asking questions. They're actively engaged and participating, because the big thing from that is once the trainer leaves, like they are now in charge and making responsible for making sure that their team follows through. So if they weren't paying attention or even involved in the training, then it's going to be very difficult for them to have that stick. They're just going to be like, hey, go back to your training, go back and do what you talked about in training. But you need that coach, that leader who's there with you. That's also just how you get more buy-in from the team, because they know, all right, this wasn't just a check the box exercise. Like they're engaged in this and they're actively participating too. That's something I always wanted to do. One, so I could learn, but then two, so I could coach my team as they went through and finished on the training, and we could build off that all together. So the solutions for this problem, I think it starts prior to even onboarding or selecting a trainer. When you're deciding who it is that you want to work and come consult your team, you need to set goals long term that you want and work backwards from that. So if there's an initiative or a program you have, now's a good time to use this example. It's the end of 2024, it's Q4. A lot of people are going through their budget planning cycles and looking at their goals for 2025. So let's say you need to increase your premium sales, or you want to tap more into the business segment and grow that 10%, or renew your business accounts to a certain amount. Working backwards off that end goal to, all right, what actions does my team need to take on a day-to-day basis to make that happen? And how can we build a training program around that on the front end so that coming out of training, they go in and apply that to the actions that are going to lead to the results they want, that then help them achieve their goals long term. A lot of consultants probably don't want to be held accountable to that level, but that's something I like talking about with teams so that I'll take that accountability. I've been in their shoes and I'm the one that's accountable for the number on the back end. So I want to make sure that we're setting them up for success. So that means we got to tweak and customize the training a little bit so it best fits them and their needs. That's what's most important to me and also should be for them. So building out on the front end, what are the goals you want so that the training all plays into that. The other thing is making sure that on a quarterly basis, we're touching base and checking in with the leaders, with the sales team. Now that they've put some time in and actually implemented it, like what are the challenges they're facing? What are the successes they're having that we could continue to build off of? So talking to the leadership team, doing like 1 hour, 2 hour workshops on a regular basis, that now that you've mastered this phase of the process, let's build off that. So it wasn't all right, you came one time at the beginning of January, next January, come back and we'll see where we're at. You want to make sure that sticks, because if you have gaps, sometimes you're going back and doing the training over again, which I'll share an example here at the end. The other thing, actually, I was on a call with the prospective client a few weeks ago, and I really like the question they asked is like, how do we make sure this sticks? It all sounds great, but like once all said and done, how do we make sure? What's your advice? What are your solutions? So I had to go to the drawing board a little bit and just brainstorm and think about what are the best ways to make that happen. So I came up with a few. I think anytime that you want someone to follow through with something, they have to take ownership of it. So what I encouraged is, yes, we'll set goals for the team on the front end, but coming out of training, what are goals that they want to achieve now? so that they're holding themselves accountable. And maybe you have buddy systems or an accountability program, but they're writing out, documenting, this is what I want to achieve. That's a quantifiable, tangible result from training. So maybe it's close 3 sales to brand new businesses I've never spoke to, or increase the number of meetings I set with new businesses on a weekly basis. Whatever that is, align with your supervisor to make sure that it's the right goals, but they're taking ownership and accountability for it too. And we're tracking that. We're not just having them set a goal, but we're not following through on it and following up on it. But that's one way to get them to participate in this exercise together and take ownership. Another one I thought that could be just, have fun and build around training, because sometimes it comes with a negative stigma, is create a contest around it. So a lot of times sales teams will build a contest to get the action and activity that they want to see from someone to get momentum going. So you could build a B2B contest that comes out of the training, break the whole staff up into different teams and give them points based on the number of new calls that they make to businesses, the number of meetings set, the revenue closed to businesses, and have that continue over a 6 to 8 week process, so that now you're taking the training. Somewhere we talked about setting that goal on the front end that builds into your long-term goals. This ties into one of your culture programs you have across the floor to make sure that you're achieving the results you need on the back end. So it's fun because they're having a contest with it to reinforce the training. Another one that I thought of was to have the staff build out business plans. So now they've gone through this training. What's their business plan for the next 3 months, 6 months, on how they're going to apply this to help achieve their goals and their results? So again, those are the solutions, and comes with immense benefits. I think the big one is when you're building in these like quarterly segments or regular check-ins, you're taking bite-sized pieces of the process. One of the things that's challenging as I go through a 2 day, even a 3 day session, is there's so much information that you could cover. It's tough to cram it all in. So one thing I'm looking to do moving forward is scale some things down, maybe on the front end where I really set the stage, and spend more time where we can actively get in and practice and do exercises in the training so that they can better reinforce it. Because I'm noticing that that takes away, you really have to rush through on the back end. But all that to say, if you're doing this and you've built out, we're going to work with, this consultant or this trainer over the next 6 months, you could take it in bite-sized pieces. So you could look at the overall process as a whole and break that down into little parts of it. So let's really master the outreach process, who we're talking to, how we make sure that we are relevant when we reach out to them, just to book more meetings. As a team, we feel good about that. Now we've set meetings. How do we master the process of running a meeting? What are the questions we ask in discovery? How do we set up clear next steps in the process? How do we keep the momentum going past that first meeting? Then, building out proposals, closing deals, cross-selling someone once you've already closed them in that onboarding transition process. So you could take it one step at a time and not feel you have to cram everything in all at the beginning of that one training. The next part that's great about that is the learning curve the next time you bring someone in or do like a big kickoff or overall training, that the learning curve is a lot smaller or a lot shorter. So for me, I had a sales trainer come in 3 years in a row. And the great thing about them coming in is we could build off, or at least the plan was to build off of that. So the first year the person came, we really wanted to go out and market and really start to tackle the business community. And it was great. We probably could have done a better job of making sure it reinforced and it stuck, kind of like I'm talking about right now. So that's why I'm very intentional about this when I do trainings. But the person came almost a year later, the same time. Well, what had happened in between that year is our team got really good. So a lot of consumers came to us. So for us to go out and find new business really wasn't a top priority. There was other opportunities for us on the B2C side. So when he came back, he's like, hey, it's great that you have me here, but I'm literally going through the same exact training I did last year. So what we need to do this time is make sure that we reinforce it and it sticks. So when that person came the third time, we were actually able to commit to it, stick with it, and build off of it. So I wouldn't say it was necessarily a waste, because every time someone comes in, someone learned something. There were new people that maybe weren't there the first time. But, I definitely felt, bad inside of having this person come out and literally do the same exact training with the same majority of the same group a second time. So making sure that you have um, that you work and build off that so that it sticks and you're not having to go backwards and do training again. The other benefit you get, and I touched on this in one of my posts on LinkedIn recently, is uh, people enjoy training. I think there's this misconception out there that people don't like training, but what I've seen is that really brings teams together. That gets people more engaged. They're more bought into what they're doing because they're getting poured into and developed. So if you're doing that, and you're not just doing this one-time training, sometimes that could be seen as just, check the box. But if you're doing it consistently, they know that you truly care about their development, their professional growth. They're going to perform better. So that leads to leadership and growth opportunities for them, but also them wanting to stay because they know that you're pouring into them and you care about their growth and development. So if you're doing training on a regular basis, that leads to higher engagement, which should keep your retention rate higher for your staff and ultimately lead to better results. So as we wrap up here, again, this is the 5 steps that are 5 problems and the steps and solutions that we've seen to really start this B2B sports sales transformation and how we can come in, work with teams, lay the initial training, and then over the next 6 months, build some processes that allow you to take that and take your B2B sales to the next level. In the next week video, what I'm going to talk about is once you've kind of tied this all in, or as you're starting to build this out or considering it, how do you get alignment across your sales and marketing team? Because we've talked specifically about sales, but you need buy-in from the marketing team and some of those other support functions to follow through with this. How do you at the executive level get buy-in to make sure that they provide the resources? I saw a post on LinkedIn recently from a consultant where they talked about they typically work with the head of marketing. And anytime they work with the head of marketing in their last few deals, they haven't been able to close them because for them to do the change that they're looking to do, which is more on the marketing side and go to market strategy side of changing processes and systems, they need the C level, the CEO, the CFO to put the resources towards seeing the success that they want to see with these programs. So it's great you have a department leader, but you need sponsorship and buy-in and resources that come from the top, and everyone's seeing that this is a top priority across the organization. So whatever I'm focusing on, I need to make sure that I provide time to support and help with this transformation. And then also, how do you develop the leaders? We talked a lot about the sales team, but how do you build out leadership development programs to make sure that your leaders are continuing to grow? One person I spoke to recently said in their league, a lot of their reps were promoted to managers through the pandemic because one, you just needed more bodies because we were starting to lose people within sports, but also as a way to retain them, but they never really got the development and growth they need as a leader. So there's a big opportunity within sports for that younger generation of leaders. And that's really who I like to talk to and target with a lot of my content, where I tell a lot of my stories, successes, failures, humility, things like that from being an early leader, because there's a gap there. And what we're looking to do is build out programs to really work with young leaders so that they can grow on to be directors, VPs, C levels within their organizations. So I'll touch on those in next week's video. But as always, appreciate you all tuning in and look forward to hearing your feedback and see you again next week. And happy Thanksgiving.